can leave that like, you can leave that like that, and when Louise starts talking, we'll zoom it in, okay? No, not right now. Hello, Mr. I got to meet your son last week. Yes, he's a nice young man. He is a nice young man, yeah. Whenever you are, sir. The meeting will come together. All right. Councilman Gregory, I don't know if you want to start off. You want to make a few comments at the beginning? We're streaming live video in case somebody wants to. We're going to record this in case somebody wants to come back and watch the RPS CLOTS presentation further down the road, in case they couldn't make it here tonight. We did post for a possible quorum. Doesn't look like we've got that here tonight, which is okay. That's even better. We did it just in case. We didn't know what interest there was going to be or how many council members might show up, and we didn't want to send anybody away if they did. I'm going to remind you that part of this we're going to have an opportunity for public comment on one of the items. So we actually have put sign-up sheets at the back if you would like to if you'd like to sign up. So we'll give you one last chance to do that. Okay, great. Thank you. So we've got Councilman Gregory here, who is our chairman for the Streets and Drainage Committee. And we've also got Luis Cuellar and Marcus Cantu with us from RPS CLOTS. We're going to give the briefing on the 30% design. Did we bring plans with us? So we have a couple sets of plans as well. So if after the meeting you want to sit down with Marcus or Luis and discuss plans, they can show you what they've got as far as plans go. I have one more introduction to make, and that's the young lady who's walking across the back of the room right here. This is Minerva Gonzalez. She is our new city secretary. We're very, very happy to have her on board. So welcome to the team, Minerva. So this is our typical Streets and Drainage Committee. We did publish an agenda. This is tweaked a little bit from it because I didn't have a chance to get the new verbiage in here. But first thing we're going to do is distribute the minutes from the May 4th meeting. Have we already done that, Minerva, by any chance? So that should have been sent out to all the different committee members. Did you guys get a copy of the minutes? Yes? You did? So were there any comments on the minutes that were sent out? Any changes we need to make from the committee members? I'll take that as a no. Okay, so we're gonna approve the minutes as written. Again, this isn't a formal meeting. We don't typically vote and so on and so forth, but unless we get any inputs, and if you go back and read the minutes and you have inputs, please provide them. So with that, with no further ado, the main attraction tonight is going to be RPS CLOTS, who's been looking at the drainage issue over at North Manton and making some improvements to the low water crossing. So with that said, Luis, I'll turn it over to you.
Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Well, again, my name is Luis Cuellar. I'm a project manager for an engineering firm called RPS Klotz Associates, and we were hired by the city of Castle Hills to develop initially 30% plans for improvements on North Manton Lane, and that's what I'm going to present to you today. Oops, let's see, how do we go to the next sheet? Oh, page 10 here. Marcus, can you help me maximize this window? You know what? I'll just go through this here. So a little background. We initially presented to the Streets and Drainage Committee in mid-March of this year, and we presented this conceptual plan that you can't see fully here, but I'll back up a little bit. As Mr. Vanderwally mentioned, we do have a set of construction plans, so after the meeting, if anybody wants to go through, we can look at the plans in a little bit more detail, see what's going on. Maybe in front of your residence, we can certainly go through that with you. So we presented the concept, like I said, back in mid-March. We formalized our proposal to the city, went through the council, and we received our notice to proceed earlier last month. The objective was a couple things. What I want to point out was the goal. The goal was really to provide relief for some of the higher frequency, low intensity events. Of course, we all know the significant amount of drainage that's coming through right now. We, as an aside, Kurt, and if I may, we have been discussing a potential long-term drainage solution with other entities, with Bexar County, with the San Antonio River Authority, with the City of San Antonio and others, to provide a better long-term solution. This particular project was really just like I mentioned, to provide relief for these high-frequency storms, and really to reduce the potential for structural flooding. There's a number of residents along North Manton that, just because of the way the current low water crossing is configured and some of the lack of existing drainage systems, that's really what triggered this. So we're going to reestablish the low water crossing the way it used to be, and that would also consist of adding some drainage culverts and some ditch improvements along a few of the residents. And then also there's a couple of areas where we felt that construction of retaining wall would be good to divert some of the storm water, especially again in these lower frequency, high intensity storms. Oops. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned, let me see if I can get this picture to show a little bit better. Oh. I apologize. This is okay. Maybe we can see that a little bit better here. But this is a Google image that shows a little better where kind of our project limits are. The red signifies some of the roadway reconstruction limits, as well as where our concrete low water. Oh, thank you very much. So, this is the limits of our low water crossing, and that's going to be a new concrete section. This section is going to be depressed a little bit, kind of the way it was before a few years ago. It's going to be made out of concrete. And also, that's part one. Part two is this green sort of signifies or depicts where the approximate location of where new ditch is going to go. And then this blue depicts where we're going to have a retaining wall again. Most of the storm water kind of, as you can see, some of the rutting here kind of goes across this way. But because of the way this low water crossing is currently configured, it jumps because there's a high point here that's not very high, and it continues and goes in through these houses. So this retaining wall is going to hopefully divert some of that storm water. Going the wrong way here. I'll quickly go through these sheets. I just wanted to show you some of the project layout sheets. And again, we have these printed out, and we can go through those in more detail. You know what? I skipped something. Let me go back up a little bit. I was concentrating too much on the... so the construction cost that we have so far formulated is $145,000. It's a little higher than what we had at our previous Drainage Committee meeting, but that's a result of... we're doing more retaining wall than we had originally sought. We're going to add retaining wall in a couple of different areas, and I'll go through those here when we get into the plan view. But that's one of the causes, and then of course the low water crossing limits expanded a little bit. Our schedule is this is our 30% submittal that we're going to present today. The next step is to go to 100% plans, what we call plans, specs, and estimate, and we anticipate having that ready by the end of next month, and then advertise the following month in August. Of course, once you advertise for bids, there's an advertisement period of typically 21 to 30 days. Once we get bids, we'll analyze the best qualified contractor. That's the lowest bid. And then we'll start construction hopefully in October. And we have approximately a 6 to 8 week anticipated construction duration period. So that would take us to the beginning of December to get the project complete. Page down. Okay, again, these are going to be hard to read, but this basically shows North Manton at the southern limits. This hatching indicates where some of the driveways will have to be reconstructed. Here on the plan view, we show the culvert and the ditch regrading. There's some utilities. There's trees, as you can see, but we're gonna avoid those or make provisions for those existing topographic and utility features. Yeah, so it's going to be difficult. So I don't know if you were here in the beginning. Was that you, Todd? So we have some plans that we can go through in a little bit more detail after the meeting, and we'd be glad to go through exactly what's going on in your front yard, and anybody's really. But again, this is again the limits of where we're going to be replacing the driveway where the culverts are. This kind of shows the path of where the ditch is going to go, and then eventually outfalling into the existing concrete line channel. Here's another driveway that we'll have to also reconstruct. And there's some details. The channels are... Okay. Yes and no. So the water that, remember, the water that we're focusing on are for these higher frequency, low intensity curves, low intensity storms, and for those, yes. Well, it depends what storm you're looking at. Is it going to carry the flow, or what flow? It'll carry certain flow, but not the ultimate flow that you would typically design a storm sewer system. Again, that's going to be addressed in the future with this potential joint venture with the city of San Antonio, Sarah, Bexar County, and those folks. So there's limitations on how deep we can go because we're restricted by how deep this channel is, and I think right now we're at that limit. So we're matching pretty much what the existing flow line is. So you can only go so deep because we're limited to what the outfall flow lines are. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's just whatever the grade is or the elevation is of that existing line channel. And this is the last basic, what we call a plan and profile sheet, showing what we're going to do in terms of the limits of the low water crossing, where we're doing some driveway, and here are the grades down here of what we're doing. But again, I know these are going to be a little bit difficult to read. We just wanted to present so everyone can see the general layout of what we're doing. And Kurt, that's all I had. So if anybody has any questions, we're... For these four specific areas or residents that have the highest likelihood of structural flooding, this is going to help. Absolutely. Some, I'm not sure how, if it's a lot, but it's going to be some. It definitely will help some. All the water is already getting to that point anyway, so it's really sort of rerouting to way the drainage used to flow before, so it'll have minimal effects, in my opinion. When you say the first three houses, you're talking about 120, 116? Oh, back towards, okay, right. It is. Well, we can after the meeting here, we can look at what you've suggested, and we'll take that into consideration. But again, we're limited to what that existing ditch, the capacity is of it, and you're absolutely right. It's not designed to carry really a significant storm event. So we're looking at that as a separate project that'll hopefully come to fruition in the next few years. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm not sure I follow you, but maybe after the meeting, we can go through and look at the plan and profile. I'm not sure if we have a 1 or 2 year warranty, but typically you have a 1 year warranty for the contractor, but there's certain agencies that do require a 2 year warranty, and we can certainly look at that. Of course, we pay for that, so we can look at that. That hasn't really been formalized. It doesn't do what? Well, you very well are still going to flood, and I'll state that right now that you will flood, because the existing system does not have that capability so I'll go on the record that you will continue to flood until there's a long-term solution that's established. So there is no guarantee that you will that there's anything. We didn't design this to any storm event at all. Now, if we would have, let's say we designed it to a 10-year frequency or a 25-year frequency, then absolutely we would guarantee that we did our calculations based on a specific storm event. In this case, we did not. So there's no guarantees. It's just going to raise the threshold a little bit. So we had the increase in the floor plan for the low water crossing. That increased. We had, I think, just based the previous low water crossing on some assumed conditions, and once we got a true pavement design, that changed a little bit. That was one thing, or two things. Well, we had a geotechnical engineer get some soil samples and run some analysis and tests and determine what type of pavement section we needed. So another thing is we also added from the original some retaining wall off-site to this. There's some retaining wall further down on the other side of Military that we didn't show here, but that's something that we're designing as well. So there was a lot of factors where that was why the cost increased. But the cost that we didn't have I think the 38,000 cost that you are maybe thinking is we had it separated into two different items. We had one for the ditch and the culvert, and then we had one for the low water crossing. We did, yes. You just don't want a ditch in front of your house, and I understand that. Yeah. Well, and that's the whole purpose of putting this ditch, is that. We can show you the plans, and maybe you can show me, but there's, from what I gathered and from what we had from our topographic survey, there wasn't really a defined path for the water in that area, in y'all's area, specifically yours. And no, is it fully open? It's not submerged. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I understood. Understood. No, I understand.
This outfall is pipe right here, it's actually pushing water.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
It skips up the right-hand side, it comes across, it goes right over the top of this, and skips your house completely and goes to top, just like a water main. And so water, you're saying that water's coming back up that pipe. Is it under these conditions? Is this under these conditions that the channel is full and all this water is coming towards you, or is it when it's relatively low flow and all the water's in the channel?
It's only when that ditch is breached that it
Yeah.
really is pressurized. I mean, normal rainfalls, I mean, everything we've gotten so far this year, this whole ditch is not a problem.
Okay.
It's only when this
It's
becomes
only
so
when it gets
full.
overburdened.
Yeah.
So could you change the geometry of that pipe so it's not coming in at 90, but it's coming in at an angle, so you get a little bit of a drafting effect? You know, as the water's in that ditch, even though it's pressurized, it's moving, and so it creates like suction on a straw as it's coming. You know, so you reconfigure that. What's that?
Well, I mean, that's a good
That's what these guys do. They tear stuff up all the time.
Are we talking about lowering,
Yes.
that's gonna allow more water, right?
Well, I think making
water
it a more
drain-
effective funnel is a good
What
idea.
it'll do, it'll keep that. Right now, what you're getting is water also backing up and coming through that fence and across your road to the house, right?
Yes.
So, yes. So what it's gonna do is allow the water to pass it.
But I understand.
Yeah, so,
This whole project is just.
yeah, one right here. Still Donnie, but we're kinda limited on our length. That's why we put it here, but we have the.
So I think what he's referring to is you can have there's certain valves that are pressurized that you can put at the end of pipes, and the ones that I'm more familiar with it's a proprietary product called Red Valve, but it sort of has a duck beak and everything, and when the pressure on and you set that, but the pressure on the water coming in, when that exceeds the pressure or the head of whatever you're outfalling to, then it's open. But when you have that reverse effect, then that doesn't open. So there's no water it's like a backflow preventer, exactly. Yeah, it's a flap gate, you're right. You can have right. Pardon me, I didn't. Exactly. Yeah. So the longer term, long term is to capture, and I'll have to show you on a bigger plan, but the idea, and we've already had preliminary discussions, as I mentioned, with the San Antonio River Authority, with the City of San Antonio, and with Bexar County, is to start a collection system closer to the intersection of West Avenue and Lock Hill Selma, and put a large diameter culvert, and that large diameter culvert would start at that intersection, come down Lock Hill Selma underneath Manton as a sort of a diversion. So the existing concrete line channel would still be in place, but there'll be a separate, larger culvert that would go all the way down Manton. And they looked at a couple of different routes, but it would eventually outfall into West Avenue and into Olmos Creek. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, we talked about that just to have a culvert underneath instead of a low water crossing, but the city didn't have the money for that. What we had allocated was a certain amount of money, and this was something that we could fit within the budget. Yeah. Yeah. What? What the cost that we came up with originally for that was a few $100,000 was for a pipe that was sized for like a 10-year or 25-year storm. But again, you have to keep in mind that we're limited to where we're outfalling. We have a concrete line channel that does not have nearly the capacity it needs. So we can put pipes that are 6-inch diameter, we can put pipes that are 6-foot diameter underneath the road. The fact of the matter is, that's what you're alluding to, that is going to be pressurized because of the amount of water that's coming. So there's going to be a limitation. So what we were trying to do, again, is a short-term solution to just minimizing the potential for structural flooding on some of these residents. And that's been the whole objective.
Yeah, this was never meant to be the be-all, end-all. It was kind of to provide some temporary relief until we get a solution that's put together with the Bear Regional Watershed Management folks, and that could be 5 to 10 years down the road, on the end side, just because that stuff takes time to work through. This was so that you had less flooding in these homes along North Manton that you're looking at right here. It was never meant to handle even a 10-year storm. It's just so that every year and a half, Todd and his neighbors don't have 6 inches of water in their house. So that's, and it's, it's we're talking about $145,000 is the estimate. We won't know what that dollar figure is until we get a bid from a contractor to actually do the work after he reviews the design. But the question we have to ask is the juice worth the squeeze? So is it worth $145,000 to protect some of our residents that live along that street there to keep from having water piling up in their house every other year? Don, you've had water
Have you had water in your house too?
You said you guys don't know yet. Had water in their house. They're new there, but they've got you can see where the water has come through. And I think, Bernie, you told me that they had water in their house. Yeah, across the street from you. Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sandra Wright. We have lived in that area, built 2 houses there, been there for 40 years. And the city has seen fit to change the configuration. They did make the street higher, which did change the water flow. And also the area where the water runs from beside the white fence, that was filled in with rocks. So that's, changing all the flow of the water. And the natural flow was different. So I'm not hearing that addressed at all, where that water flows beside that white. I think we had donated the land to the city to build a ditch because our neighbors had water in their houses. And now I'm hearing that some of the neighbors, when those houses were sold, said they're never going to water in them. That's not true. So I just like to add, I just wanted to give you that historical perspective. You want to come? Yeah, they added rocks alongside the white fence that goes perpendicular.
Yeah, it used to be kind of angled, from what I've gathered. If we're looking,
See that addressed.
yeah, well, that's in a private, that's in private property, so, not sure how we could address.
Well, it's affecting that property,
Understood.
and it's going to continue to affect that property.
So from what you're telling me, is one of the oldest laws in the book is the Texas Water Code, and Chapter 1 is, thou shalt not change the water flow onto your neighbor's property. So, and I know you guys are new there, and I know you guys are new there, but it sounds like previous residents have changed water flow potentially. But as Luis was alluding to, that's not a city issue. Yeah. So I guess when I talk to the lawyers about this thing, they say throw words out like potential prescriptive easement, that's where the water's always run, and that's not a city issue to get involved in. That really boils down to kind of a civil matter between residents and whatnot. So I think there's a dialogue that might have to take place to what, if y'all are interested in having the dialogue, to what could be done to revert back to previous. To make it more like the previous water flow was.
Want to know how the rocks would affect if we removed them. How would it affect everybody in general? Because streams, you see rocks in the streams, and it doesn't really change the flow. Because we have water running from like Loch Hill Selma, like from the west, and it breaks down our fence on Loch Hill Selma and comes all through there before the water even flows onto Manton Lane. So my question is, how would removing these rocks assist with that when the problem begins before it even comes onto the property? Like the flow is so rapid that it breaks down our fence there, and then our fence that connects to their house, we have it rigged up to where it can lift or push if it needs to push. So we've adjusted some of the things so that way it doesn't build and then destroy our neighbor's property. But I don't know how the removing the rocks will change the flow when it starts way before it comes onto the property.
Are you at the corner? Okay. Yeah, no. So the corner, I think what we're talking about is this lot right in front of North Manton. That's you. And those rocks, not yours, but theirs.
Okay. So there's a discussion that, we probably need to have that says, or I hate to say it, but y'all probably need to have, because it's not really necessarily a city issue. Now, you talked about the city changes to what goes on in the city right away. Sure, that is a city issue, and that is, I think, what Luis and Marcus are proposing is to rectify that and make it to where it'll carry more water through there. and keep it from jumping out and jumping out into the street and getting over into Todd and Don's house. And that's the goal is to do that. But if that's what the city's looking at, is to fix that portion. But for anything outside of that city right away, it's that becomes, like I said, a civil issue. So, and they probably don't know any of this, right? You guys are brand new to the neighborhood. You do know some of it, okay? All right. And this wasn't an ambush, so I didn't intend it to be. So, and you filed your complaint with the city, or who did it? So there was an overlay on top of what was there existing. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Wright? Yeah. So that's yeah, that probably exacerbated the problem. So again, what RPS Klotz is proposing should fix what was done prior. So Rick, do you have any comments? You were here during all that? No? Do you want to comment on any of this? Rick's been around here for a long time, so
Correct. And I would even say not even a modest rain. This would help on a light rain.
well, it's got to raise the threshold somewhat. I don't know what that threshold is, Councilman. I don't know if that threshold is, light, medium, modest, torrential, heavy, whatever. I don't know where it fits on there, but if you make the drainage improvements, it's going to lessen the impact of the flooding up to a certain threshold, and then after that, it's Katie bar the door. It's coming anyway. So I think that channel was probably designed for what, a 5-year flood or something to that effect.
Less than that.
Less than that. So at maximum, that's what you're going to get out of it, is whatever that channel is designed to withstand. And Luis talked about retaining walls. One of those retaining walls is down where that channel ties to the channel behind the houses, and it makes almost a 90-degree
On
tie-in.
Banyan.
So to put a retaining wall across the top back there, so if we speed the water up, it doesn't automatically jump out into those residents' house at the end of that. And then there's another resident that lives on the other side of Northwest Military. You guys will probably remember that had flooding in his house in a recent flood. And it would build a retaining wall there where that water goes through an S-curve to keep that water in the channel there. And again, for a major flood, perhaps not, but at some threshold, a 2-inch or a 3-inch versus a 2-inch or whatever, it would prevent that water from jumping over that curb.
Sure.
It varies. At their house, maybe 20 feet. Like 12 feet across the bottom, about 20 across the top. It's trapezoidal. Oh, sure, you can go in there and increase the channel size, but you're talking about... I think you still have to do this.
Understood.
So I think
I think
looking at the
that's something that we're,
geometry there so that it doesn't tie in at that 90 degree, because that's part of the problem as well, I think.
well, the thing about that is that we have limitations on where the easement is and where the right-of-way is. So if we were to angle it, we would require an easement from you to, so that was something that we were limited on how far we could, because of the trees and everything, how we could get that fit within the existing right-of-way. Yeah, and I apologize. What I meant by by 30% is that we're 30% complete with these plans. But what you're seeing and what I've presented today, that's 100% of the project. Yes, ma'am. The only thing that we did not show was that retaining wall that's on the other side of Northwest Military, but this is essentially the main project. I think, do we have saw cut curb right now? Okay. Yeah, I think we're going to look at putting some traffic barriers in lieu of that, similar to what we have on Banyan. Yes, ma'am. Those are actual, yeah, yes, sir. Bollards, correct. Bollards. Is that it? I think we.
Price is right. Hello?
Oh, let me. Oh, this is it here. You want? Is it?
No, it doesn't sound like it's. Yeah. Hello? Okay.
I need to press it again. Oops.
And try to reference this thing. Yay, it works. Can everybody hear me? I think it's important that all the residents everybody came here to talk, right? I think most of the residents on North Manton agree how the water behaves. Wouldn't you say that's accurate? So I think making this a more accentuated funnel to feed the ditch is a good idea. Because the water's not effectively going into it right now. That's why we're getting water in my house and Don's house, and because the water comes across here, and instead of being forced into the ditch, it's kicking it off wherever it feels like going, and that's based on the topography of the street. And they filled it up. Yeah. And I really appreciate your comments about adding rocks and things over here. I don't know that really. The water really has nowhere else to go. So I mean, they put rocks here, I think, just to kind of make it look a little better. You know what I mean? But ultimately, the water has nowhere to go. So I mean, unless they put like a large concrete wall here, I don't really see it, because again, the problem still remains that the water just kind of goes wherever it wants in this area. It wouldn't contain it. No, I mean, you'd have to just Jeff's front yard would have to be a big drainage ditch to do really anything. Mm-hmm. That fence has been there since I was a little kid. I remember that fence being there when I was real young. Push this, it'll make it.
What you want? Did you want to see something else?
I was gonna try to get a good shot of this guy right here.
Okay.
So yeah, if you just put basically like a, and I can make one for you if you guys want. It's just like a metal plate that has a little hinge that's anchored into the concrete.
No, we understand. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think
Water
that,
doesn't-
that's actually a good suggestion.
You know,
So
that way
we're going to look at that.
hydraulically force it
Understood.
that way.
Understood.
I think all the residents.
Was that question for me or Todd? Oh, okay. Yeah, you said
This
Todd.
area right here.
That, no, so we,
It is.
there's a transition, and that's just what we're showing. There's limits of where we're doing the actual concrete low water crossing, and then transition with asphalt back to the existing road. Oh, absolutely not.
So the
Well, so the question was where the low spot was in that other smaller square, and I said absolutely not. We know where the low water is, but what we're trying to depict here as best we could, and we'll show it in more detail on the plans, is the approximate limits of where we're constructing, is what it is. So we have a section that's going to be a concrete low water crossing, and then there's a section that we're going to transition back with asphalt. That's not, quote unquote, the low water crossing, and that's what that smaller square shows. That's all it is. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We're lowering that entire area.
you're gonna grade the area.
We are.
So anyway, my other okay, so we're all on the same page of how everything flows. So, you know, putting a valve in here would be effective. Digging out the street would be effective. In terms of this, I know that Miss Beddick is going to be very concerned about oak tree roots and digging up this area. I mean, I really don't care. I don't have anything in front of my yard that's like really concerning. So that my dog in the fight really is not that as much as I don't want to see the city needlessly spend money on something that's not going to be very effective. I think a lot of my neighbors agree with me on that. But, I mean, I'm all for doing something that's going to work, you know what I mean? But I think with whatever is done, I think there needs to be some form of expectation that's reasonable before we spend 150 grand on something. Say, hey, this is going to alleviate X, Y, or Z problem. If you're like, well, it won't really do much, you know what I mean? Well, yeah, but I mean, in terms of this is not going to solve anything, I don't really see a whole lot of reason to do that. But
No. But your neighbors are sitting right next to you there, and I think they heard you loud and clear. So the question is, I think what you're saying is if you were to extend this concrete channel back to the right over here, back towards where that fence crosses. Yeah. That's, well, it's going to help because it'll channelize that water a little bit better. I mean, I'm speaking for Luis here. It's got to help, but again, we're talking about not $145,000 now, because now you're adding all this concrete channel in here as well. It'll drive the cost up. So, well, and what you're saying is that, Ms. Wright, it doesn't have to be concrete. You could make it a natural feature. And the ditch was filled in. And I mean, I can't help but think that probably did exacerbate the problem a little bit, because it gives that water an opportunity to jump. I think everything you've talked about tonight, the fact that they raised this up a little bit and they've overlaid it since then. Mr. Wright spoke about this sawtooth curb through here, that it's an ineffective method because the debris gets caught in there, so it automatically raises the level of that by 8 inches or whatever the height of those curbs are. So maybe a series of bollards with some cables between them, Luis, like, bollards stationed through here and maybe tied together with cables to catch any cars, at a little bit higher level, so they don't catch debris as much, but they'll allow the water to pass through there. I mean, I don't know what the right solution there is, or maybe just bollards, just so they'll stop a car, but not having these curbs so closely spaced together so that they automatically get plugged up when you start getting debris through there. So that's something that we need to consider. We need to consider the geometry here, right? And look, and I can't help but think, but if you move that outfall down here and put it in at more of an angle, that you'd have a lot less water coming back up through the drainage ditch there, and maybe increase the pipe size there as well, and then you don't have that problem. And we can do the famous Todd Herman damper on the end of it over here. You ought to patent that, Todd. The Todd Herman damper will go, but I can't help but think that. But that means that we've got to talk to you about getting easement. Any solution that requires something through your front yard would require the city coming to you for easement. So all these are great inputs, I think, into the design process. I think what I heard Todd saying is he's in favor of all this, but he's not in favor of the culverts, the culvert pipes through there.
How deep the ditch is? It's only 2.5.
Yeah.
I take the hit. See, you guys don't get it, but I take the hit. Because I have a tremendous amount of water.
Yeah.
I can sell it. I mean, the culvert that was in front of our house, it was culvert. I first bought the house. Now, all the water that's flowing on the top is, I have no curb, it just goes right into my yard. So, what's this, all the runoff on the top of it?
All this from up here. So Don's got a little trench dug by his house over there.
The flow from low range, just from our, not from the city of San Antonio. That's been the big flood zone. So I'm getting, on a 1-inch rain, no idea the flow that goes through my yard because there's nothing to stop it. So I'm stuck at the top of the hill using all that water. So you're saying that
Hello. You're saying that water comes from the top of the hill and goes into your house.
straight down a lot of it. And I
So how is digging a ditch in front of my house going to hit that water? Because the water would have to go this way, and then, you follow me?
going through my yard.
So essentially, you would need a ditch on the other side. But you see what I'm saying? Like, they're proposing digging a ditch in my yard.
It's
How is
good-
the water, if the source is over here, how is the water digging a ditch here going to alleviate flooding?
It extends to his yard.
So it magically comes over this way and then goes into his yard?
That's the way it always was, Bob.
No, hold on a second. Gravity works only one way, so
But it used to be gravity fed, it would go down to the ditch. I'm trying to tell you that.
yes, okay, Don. So how I pose the question, how is digging a ditch in my yard going to alleviate flooding from your yard when the source is to the right of my yard?
It does, the gravity goes down, and I'm at the top of the hill. You're just partially way down the hill. It does all go to the ditch.
Do we have any shots of that? I mean, maybe I'm not making myself clear enough.
I'm higher than you are, and it will come down, and there used to be a
Yes.
It's filled in over time.
And that's what we're trying to reestablish with this project as
I get
well.
all the water and it doesn't go anywhere because you have raised your driveway, so it doesn't go that way, it comes just straight off down into me. So none of it goes towards you anymore because your driveway is higher than my yard. It's taken all my dirt away and it goes straight through the eastern side of my yard. That's why I had to recently dig all that out so it goes straight back for the small rain and for the big rain. Big rains are what come across your yard into my yard. Those are the really big rains. I'm getting a 2-inch rain the other day, and I have a stream going through my yard. And it's not from my yard, it's from the street. So I'm getting stuck with the high point in there. And it used to go in front of your yard.
Makes sense.
It used to go in the ditch. Now I'm just stuck with it. So I am in favor of it.
I mean, I have videos of rainfall that don't depict what you're describing.
You're coming from the big floods over there, but you're not doing the 2-inch rain the other day. I did it I'm going down.
I actually have live video of that whole scene if you want to watch it.
Todd, you're not in my yard.
Well, no, you're saying that the water is
Todd,
flowing a certain way, and I'm saying I have video of it.
It had nothing to do with what's coming from San Antonio. I'm taking it down to Bexar County to show them I have a major drainage through my yard. Not necessarily from San Antonio on a smaller rain, on what's coming from Castle Hills alone. This is Castle Hills flow. So what Castle Hills used to have to take care of that is no longer there. I said, well, build me a curb, do something. But I'm getting all the rain from the hill because the ditch is gone.
Okay, so we have, that's exactly what this project would do. That's part of it, to get it, to excavate it, to put pipe in underneath the driveways. That's exactly what RPS Klotz is proposing. So, hey, let's remember we're all neighbors. We got to go back to the neighborhood together.
If that ditch is somewhat effective, when it does overflow, it will at least somewhat impede some of that water from going all the way up because it's going to go to the ditch. And it will be directed back to the ditch. So it will have some minor effect of even mediating how far that water is going to come out, how fast.
Yeah, I think,
Out that ditch, it's just going to flow straight into your yard and start flooding everything because it has no place to go.
yeah, I think, John,
Have a low spot. You're creating a low spot for it to go back out.
Don, thanks for sharing, because your dynamic with the water is different than Todd's, even though you're next door neighbor. So, yeah,
And Todd's got this
so
overflow from the ditch.
yeah, so thanks for sharing. And that's the thing, is everyone, even though you live next door to each other, you all have different vantage points and perspectives of how the water comes through your yard and towards your house. Everybody's is slightly different, and that's what we're trying to decipher here, is a solution that best meets everybody's needs. Councilman.
We believe so, yes. I would say light rains to modest, but more for the lighter rains as well, as he just indicated. Well, let's see. I need to look at the cost estimate a little bit more. There's some items that I'm not sure. I think we had. Typically, you want to have. Do we have concrete pipe? Oh, we have CMP. We can look at doing some adjustments to the plants. And we do have a contingency as well. We have at this early phase we have a 25% contingency, so once we get them a little bit more, we get more defined with our design, and we start looking at some of these adjustments. I think we can get the cost a little lower. Yes, ma'am.
I think any way we can reduce costs but get the same effect is a good thing, right? Yeah. Councilman Paul, you had a question.
I'd have to see exactly how fast it was, what we call the intensity. Well, it was 2 inch in what time, so that's what the intensity is.
Is that the storm this weekend? Just this weekend? Did y'all have any flooding over there with that? It's, so Don, you're not directly up on top of the hill. You're kind of on the side hill, and the water comes from across the street towards you. The people across the street are higher than you. So, yeah. Yeah, so
yeah, I don't either. I mean, do you know what happened?
and that's the plan, is to start it. That is the plan. But they all wind up in the drainage channel behind your house, and the goal is to not have it run through any of your houses, right? It's,
Right. I mean, I've gone over this 6-8 times with you. We're going based on what we see, what the contours are. So
Well, I'd be happy to go meet with them. I'd be happy to go meet with them again out there. So we have already done this once, right, gentlemen? Where we all kind of met out there and we talked about the problem and we talked about the solution.
I offer this, say, I want to even in the stop gap, if you can somehow get it to where I can between five times. Our lot line is back. I offer that. I offer be able to go, I'll allow the damage here, you won't do that. You can't do that. You are mandated there, not allowed to do that.
Well, we'd have to establish an easement through there. We'd have to go in there and put infrastructure in place, and that's not the ultimate solution. Whatever we put in there with this design is going to stay there, even with the ultimate solution, and it's still going to help convey water up and down that street. And I think, yeah, you did, Don, and I really think that, again, what Luis is proposing is not perfect. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's going to help the problem, and it's going to, Don, I thought you put it very eloquently that, you know, it's going to prevent some storm that normally would overjump that bank staying it. It's going to keep it in the bank, and it's going to keep your home from flooding once, twice, 3 times, 4 times over the next 10 years before we can put in a better, a more long-term solution. And just let me speak to that with the residents that are here, because y'all probably haven't heard me. I know the streets and drainage guys have, but we have been meeting with the city of San Antonio, with Bear County, San Antonio River Authority at this Bear Regional Watershed Management Board, and I believe we've got them to agree that this is a regional problem. There's a couple of our drainage issues, particularly this one and the one down on Banyan, that virtually all the water, or a large percentage of the water, comes from the city of San Antonio. So I think we've got them biting off on that now, and we're supposed to go meet with them on July 5th. Now, there's no promise of resources, but it's the recognition that they've got some skin in the game, which is what we're after first. And then we'll go down, how do we resource this thing jointly? And, you know, what is Castle Hill's portion of this bill? What is San Antonio's portion of this bill? What is Bear County's portion of this bill? How are we gonna fund this? But let's at least get to the point where we could say we have a regional issue. And I think we're pretty darn close to that. We're meeting them, I believe, July 5th is the next meeting with those guys. And it's a closed meeting, so y'all can't come. So my larger solution is not ever having that water come from the city of San Antonio in there to begin with. Pick it up on West Avenue or Lock Hill Selma and get it out of here before it gets to Castle Hills. That's what I want to do. Well, at your house, for this watershed, between here and where it dumps out in Cremeria through the city of Castle Hills, it was about 50-50 from through Castle Hills. But at this point, it's almost 100% San Antonio, right? I mean, it's probably 75% of it is coming out of San Antonio, and the rest is coming through Don's front yard over there off the hill in Castle Hills. But most of it's come from San Antonio, maybe more, 80, 90%. And that's the approach we're taking with them is, and I showed them, I took slides that Todd provided for me. I took pictures where with it flooding and showed them this is what it looks like when it's not flooding. This is what it looks like when it's flooding. By the way, you see that fence back there, that white fence? That's San Antonio on the other side of that fence. So this water is all coming through your property, and it's all San Antonio water at this point. Now, there's a lot of discussion and argument that goes into that because that's where that water is drained since the beginning of time. Through that, well, maybe. But that's where it's always drained, so there's a certain amount of that you go, okay, it was always there before City of San Antonio got there, but City of San Antonio has certainly exacerbated that problem with their development. And they understand that, and they've recognized that, and they've realized, and it's been very professional, very collegial, and I'm hoping that we continue down that road. So, but I think there's no perfect solution here. I think that's what we're kind of struggling with is there's not a perfect solution, but what Luis and Marcus have put forward is a reasonable solution to provide reasonable relief until we get to a longer-term solution. And is it worth the money that the city's going to pay for it? I personally think it is because it's going to improve the drainage conditions for multiple families in the city of Castle Hills. So yeah, you're right, and you can't just say 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, because a lot of it has to do with how long it is that rain falls. If it falls over 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or 2 days, but the solution that was put up there would have helped with that flood, because that drainage crossing would have been lower to begin with. Right? Right, you agree with me there. Now, it probably would have helped Don out with the culvert, and it may have helped you too. We don't know yet until they do the hydraulic calculations. And they've already done some of those, haven't you guys? Yeah. So they've done, I mean, what they've got to present to you guys today is much more than a 30% design solution. It's probably closer to the 75%, and they can sit and go through you with a set of plans. But they run calculations based on slopes, grades, conveyance of the pipes, water pressures, flow rates through the channel. They do all that, and that's what's in the numbers that are going into the design here. So, and you have to be real careful. I hate to say this, but I'm the world's worst. I can stand here and go, oh no, that's higher over there. But in reality, your mind doesn't, you can't really ascertain that until you put a level out and you shoot the grade and you go, oh, no, it's actually lower over there. So sometimes your mind will play tricks on you with where you think water is going to go if they come in and put these culvert pipes in there. But I trust the professionals that they're designed. Yeah. Right, but you don't, that's what you see, but you don't see what you don't see, Todd, is what their configuration will do when they get the final grades established over there. You can't, it's, unless you're really wicked smart, as they say in Boston, you can't figure out where that water's going to run. No pun intended.
We do. We have that already.
They've gone out there and done
Yes, ma'am. We did a topographic survey, and that topographic survey shows topographic features of the area. There's elevations. Yes, ma'am. Well, it's up to. Okay.
See where it runs now. That's what Todd's saying, is you can see where it runs now, but when they establish final grades, you should be able to see where it's going to run there as well. So, okay. Does anybody else have any other inputs for the design team? I mean, I know, like I say, we're never going to be all of one mind on this. I think that my takeaways from this are that we've got a relatively, reasonable solution to help alleviate the problem, but not get rid of it. It's not going to get rid of it, but it's that. I think we've got some. I'd like to have a discussion with you guys at some point. On behalf of some of the folks here, it's really not. It's not necessarily a city matter, but if y'all want to talk about, is there anything that could be done in your front yard? And you guys, if you're with your fence, I think that could be an issue that needs to be discussed. We talked about perhaps getting additional easement so that we can. Okay. Yes. Okay, well, we could take a look at it, but I just want to start the discussion because it might help that configuration that's there. So, but this was intended to be open dialogue. So I hope that you guys have felt like you've had an opportunity to look at it, provide open dialogue. And I really want to stop the conversation here and we can continue the conversation later. Okay, I know you are. And you've been very helpful, by the way. I mean, the stuff you provided me to go to that BRWM was extremely helpful in sitting down and meeting with them. No, we have a tractor. Kind of, yeah. It's got a bucket. It is a tractor. So it's got different attachments.
It has 5 accessories. The tractor has a bucket in the front like a bobcat. It has a box grader in the back, a shredder also for a backhoe.
Yeah, I'd love to have Bobcat. Don wants it. No, it's not. It's the whole thing, the whole ball of wax, to include a couple retaining walls down that channel. So anyway, hey, again, so we have a set of plans. What I'm going to ask you to do, Luis, if you want, is if you want to go back to the back tables and look over those.
Absolutely.
We're going to kind of step through the rest
Yes,
of the
sir.
Streets and Drainage Committee meeting.
Okay.
Councilman, is that okay with you? I want to go to my chair here and say, I think we've probably run this as long as is productive, so, and then we'll jump into the rest of the meeting. You could also drag one of those tables out into the hall.
Yeah, I'll
you know,
do that.
if we wanted to, and it might be a little less noisy for
Yes,
you
sir.
guys.
We'll go
Okay.
outside.
Hey, I want your
How you
microphone,
doing?
though.
Good to see you, man. You been all right? Yes, sir. Oh. Take it home. Use it on my kids.
All right, man. Thank you, Luis. Okay, we're gonna switch over to the rest. You guys are welcome to. They're gonna set a table outside if the folks from Mountain Lane want to go out here. And yeah, thanks. We still got about 2 hours of meetings to go, so yeah, you. No, only one, Patty, only one. I promise you. Okay. We do. If you guys want to go on, we had published a bigger agenda. Now, Councilman, it's up to you. I can kill the mic and we can, because we've done, we really wanted to get yeah. You're always yourself, Don. That's the problem. Just kidding. Just kidding. All right. If you're okay, Councilman. You want to stop the broadcast then? We're going to stop the broadcast, Councilman.